There's got to be a point, right? I mean, maybe there's even a way to escape. It's just nobody's figured out how yet.
It's time to go to the murder house yet again for the season 1 finale of American Horror Stories. Let's dive in and find out just what happened. What's going on, you lovely people? Lisa here, and the first season of American Horror Stories on Hulu, or FX on Hulu, has come to a close. This final episode is called Game Over and finds us once again reuniting with the infamous murder house and some familiar faces from season 1 of American Horror Story and faces we met in this show, American Horror Stories. Now, this show has been renewed for a season 2, so it'll be interesting to see if they call upon any other seasons of the parent show as a callback, kind of like they did for this season. But moving on, let's dive into this episode titled Game Over. So the episode introduces us to Connie and Dylan, which is interesting because it's kind of like a tribute to Connie Britton and Dylan McDermott from season 1 of American Horror Story. Now, you may recognize Connie as Noah Cyrus. Yeah, I guess she's getting back into acting. Maybe she should stick with singing. I don't know, but yeah, she's Connie in this episode, and, you know, Jimmy from Fuller House, his first name I think is really Adam, is playing Dylan here. Now, these two characters are huge fans of the show American Horror Story, so way to get meta. And since the murder house is now an Airbnb, they've booked a night experience there. Now, Dylan and Connie then head to the kitchen where a bottle of wine and a note is waiting for them. Now, these two are so turned on by this house that they do follow the black rose petals to the bedroom where they hear some noises and kind of wonder if someone else is in the house with them, kind of controlling this whole experience. But then, once Dylan throws on his striped Tate sweater, the two are well turned on, and he lasts 2 short pumps before they decide to go explore the rest of this house. Now, something weird happens though as Connie gets stuck to this bed and can't get up. Dylan eventually pulls her up and they head to the basement after seeing some familiar faces like the nurse, and then down in the basement they find some girls trapped down there.
Who the hell are they? Did we miss an episode?
I'm sorry, who are you?
Yeah, sorry, which episode are you guys from?
What are you talking about?
Yeah, as super fans of the show, they don't recognize these girls. Now, these girls explain that 10 years prior, they went trick-or-treating and landed at this house, and Dr. Ben Harmon answered the door. Now, he told them to go, but they thought he was hot, and the door happened to stay open, so they were going to play some tricks on him and came inside the house, and, well, that was a mistake because you can guess they were murdered. The girls then asked Connie and Dylan for help, since the experience is called Escape from Murder House, Dylan thinks maybe there's some kind of loophole and they can figure out a way to help. But then they just start getting attacked by killers like Twisty the Clown and Infantata, and then Dylan gets shot by a familiar face.
I told you, dumb bitch, you were gonna die in here.
What are you doing here? You died on the street!
We've all come here from all over.
Then we see that Connie gets stuck again, and the screen starts to glitch, and it's kind of like, wait, what's happening? What is it, our TV screen? But then we kind of get our twist. Or maybe it's not that big of a twist given the name of this episode. It turns out this was all part of a video game that a woman named Michelle is developing in order to try to connect with her teenage son, Rory. Side note here, we do have another Disney Channel alum in this episode. Nicholas, who plays Rory, played Louie on Disney's Stuck in the Middle alongside Jenna Ortega. Just a random callback there. He also played a young Robert Kardashian in American Crime Story, which explains the Ryan Murphy connection here. He's definitely grown up. I cover a lot of Disney Channel stuff on this channel. It's the only reason I kind of bring that up, because I didn't even recognize him, but I recognize the name. Anyway, Michelle seems to have quit her job and given everything up to develop this video game to connect with Rory. And Rory's kind of basically like, this is a little extreme, Mom. You could have just watched American Horror Story with me to connect with me. Well, Michelle is now in too deep with this game, and Rory says she just doesn't understand the vibe of the show, and that she doesn't get him either, so he thinks things are getting a little weird, and he goes to stay at his dad's house. Well, Michelle decides that she's got to do something to win her son back, so she does research and binge watches American Horror Story, at least season 1, because they keep showing the murder house. Then she goes to the murder house to actually meet with Tim, the real estate agent, and offers to buy the house. Now, they mention here in this part that there were 9 bodies that were found in the house about a year ago or so, as well as Ruby's body in the backyard. So the 9 bodies, that would be Maya, and her 3 friends, Scarlett's 2 dads, Adam the contractor, the other contractor guy, and I'm guessing Dr. Grant, all from the first 2 episodes of this season. Now, I know there's been some inconsistencies here with people being like, well, how are the souls still here if the bodies are removed? I'm guessing since these bodies have been removed, it means that as long as you were killed on the premises of the house, your soul remains. But like I said, there's been some inconsistencies that you guys have pointed out over the season, so with this, I guess that's what's gonna be the law of the land. But back to the episode. Michelle offers $100,000 for this house, and it seems like Tim's taking her up on it because no one else wants this cursed land. Now, Michelle is hoping that being in this house, she can learn all the secrets and get the vibe for her video game right. So, it's Halloween, and she heads over to her ex's house to see Rory and tell him this news. And, well, sort of tell him the news. And it kind of made me laugh that we get a second Fuller House alum in this episode. We get Michelle's ex, Steven, who's played by John Brotherton, who played Matt Harmon on Fuller House. Just another random connection that doesn't matter. Anyway, Michelle tells Rory she's going away for a week to a Halloween horror convention to find the writers of American Horror Stories so she can pick their brain for her video game. You gotta drink every time they say video game in this damn episode. Then her ex Steven steps in to say that Michelle is taking this whole thing a little too far. She's getting obsessed just like she did with things when they were married.
This trip is gonna be the answer to all our worries.
That's right, Mom. You don't have to prove anything to me.
Of course, Michelle is not going to a Halloween horror convention. Instead, she heads to the murder house where, before she even gets in the gates, 2 kids dressed as the Rutger twins from season 1 of American Horror Story tell her she's gonna die in there, and well, you can kind of guess where this is going. As Michelle is walking in, she passes a lot of familiar faces like Rubberman, Piggy Man, Maya and her friends. They're all leaving to go have their night of freedom on Halloween. Then she sees Ruby. Ruby meets Michelle at the door, and Michelle just kind of assumes all these people are super fans who have dressed up to come to this house on Halloween. Then Scarlett from the first 2 episodes shows up, and she and Ruby run inside, and Michelle follows, calling out to, see if anybody's inside the house, but no one is answering her. So somehow she can't hear Ruby and Scarlett in the bathtub.
If you could escape this house, not out in the world, but like in a put your soul to rest kind of way, would you do it?
Maybe a few years ago before I met you.
Michelle sits in the kitchen when the infamous little red ball rolls to her feet, and then she starts to hear crying and finds Dr. Ben Harmon in the living room. Yep, Dylan McDermott is back for this episode. He was obviously mentioned in the first 2 episodes as the other therapist in this house. Now we see him, and Dr. Grant's now the other therapist in the house. Now, Michelle and Dr. Ben start chatting, and she tries to find out what she can about the murder house, not understanding that he is a ghost at first. She again mentions a million times she's making this video game and trying to figure out the point of it, and Ben says there's no point to this house. It's just endless and dull with no escape.
The people who are trapped here are probably stuck because they never resolved their issues when they were alive. Maybe the point is that you have to learn and grow, and only then can you escape.
Now, Ben kind of laughs off this idea, saying it didn't work with Tate. Like, he actually tried to see if Tate could change, but nothing happened. Tate's still crazy. Well, Michelle doesn't seem like she's getting the answer she wants from Ben, so she asks if she can speak to someone else from this house, and then she runs into Ruby and Scarlett. And Ben tries to help Michelle get out of that house, but he's met at the door by Rubberman, and then Scarlett and Ruby, well, stab Michelle. We then flash forward a year later on Halloween when Michelle finds Rory on the street. He's mad at her because, well, she lied about where she was going and it took a whole week for anyone to find her body. He says that her obsession got her killed. He's kind of like, you could have just gone to a shrink instead of getting yourself killed. Well, Michelle says she's stuck at this house and there's no escaping, but then Rory thinks he may know a way to end it all.
Fire. Fire purifies everything. You need to burn that motherfucker to the ground, and I'm more than happy to do the job.
Now, Rory doesn't care if his mom is gone forever, he just wants to put an end to this cursed house. So, after Ruby and Scarlett say goodbye on this Halloween, Rory rolls up with a wheelbarrow full of gas cans and starts pouring it all over the yard. Now, Ruby hears and starts to get upset because she doesn't want to be free, and she tries to run downstairs to stop Rory, but then gets stopped by familiar faces like Maya and her friends and Ben, who honestly just want this whole thing to be over. They can't keep doing this repetitive thing decade after decade. Ben even attaboys Rory. Now they start to stab and kill Ruby, but she does manage to send a help text to Scarlett. As for Rory, he's having trouble getting his match lit, and by this time it seems like Ruby has come back regenerated, whatever you want to call it, and is heading towards him with her little switchblade. But again, gets stopped by Ben and Maya. It buys him a little time, but then Scarlett runs up behind Rory, but it's just a tad too late as Rory finally gets his match lit and drops it, lighting this murder house on fire. Now, amidst the flames, Ruby does ask Scarlett to die with her, but Scarlett doesn't, and she leaves. Rory and his dad then watch the news, which says that the murder house is burned down. Seems like there's just some smoldering embers, and it might be the end of this house. We then flash forward 3 more years to see Scarlett has a new Mustang now and meets with Tim, the real estate agent, the same guy at a new condo building. Now, she asked Tim if he told all the other buyers about the land these condos were built on. So it seems like the murder house burned down 3 years ago, and then 6 months ago they opened these new condos on the land. And of course, Tim did not tell any of the buyers, because why would he? There's been no signs in the 6 months of any harm or apparition sightings, so he didn't feel like he needed to tell anybody else. Now, since this unit that Scarlett's looking at is the last one available, she offers $1 million in cash, which she seems to have gotten from being a hired assassin, but now she's semi-retired. At least that's what she tells Tim. Anyway, Scarlett does move in, and she goes to the bathroom, lights a bunch of candles, calls out for Ruby while she's in the bathtub, but nothing happens. Then Scarlett goes to bed, and, well, guess who shows up?
I was the only one who wanted to stay. For you, Scarlett. I knew you'd come back to me. True love never dies.
Well, I guess true love never dies, and guess what? Michelle learned how to end her game because bloody fireworks start going off on the screen, and we see that the game is actually over. Yep, this whole thing was actually, again, meta, whatever you want to call it, as we pull back to see it's just version 2.0 of the video game that Rory has been playing, and he managed to escape from Murder House. So it seems like Michelle, after the first round of advice from Rory, went, did her research, watched the show, and then ended up just inserting herself and her son into this actual video game. Now, Michelle asks if this version of the game meets the vibe check, and Rory says yeah, and offers a few more suggestions, but overall, he's very proud of his mom. Then Rory kind of asks where she thinks the other spirits went, if some crossed over and some stayed behind, and then if any escaped into the world, and it looks like the story of Murder House maybe isn't actually fully over yet. And well, that ends season 1 of American Horror Stories. So yeah, the whole video game concept, it's kind of getting confusing of what's real and what's not real, but it just seems like we got to see the whole video game acted out. Now, here's the thing. If the fire thing actually worked, why has no one just burned this house down already? Why do we keep getting so many murder house stories? Just freaking burn the thing down. But then again, I guess some of these spirits would be released into the world. That could make a whole other new show, spin-off. Yeah, I don't know how those little things work. Where do they get... Are they trapped anywhere, or can they roam anywhere they want? Overall, I do think I liked this episode better than the previous Rubber Woman episodes, and it was nice to see some familiar faces like Jamie Brewer and Dylan McDermott, even though Dylan's the only one who kind of got more stuff to do, but it was a lot of Easter eggs. It was like a love letter to Murder House, I feel like, so it was nice to see. It was a little weird, though, that they said that this season would be self-contained stories, yet 3 of the episodes actually went together, which kind of made it feel like all these episodes should somehow tie together at the very end, but they didn't. So I wonder if going into season 2, maybe if they'll have episodes that tie together as well. Maybe they tie to American Horror Story Asylum or something, that season 2. I don't know, I guess we're gonna have to wait to find out. Lots of questions. But yeah, now I guess that's all there is to talk about this episode. It seemed pretty straightforward, right? You know, it ended up being a video game about Murder House, but there were still some spirits that were somehow unleashed, which is interesting because if the house didn't really burn down, then how did that red ball get there? How did the spirits get released? Maybe they really did go burn the place down and just happened to work out with the game. There's some unanswered questions there that maybe we'll get answers to, maybe we won't. It's kind of fun to theorize about these shows, though, kind of figure out what everybody's thinking, because I think everybody usually thinks something different. Overall, the series, still some kind of cringy acting, but it was entertaining, I guess. I gotta know, though, what did you think of this episode? How does it rank in the 7 episodes that you watched this season? Will you actually be tuning in for season 2? And if so, what do you think will happen there? Will they draw upon any other American Horror Story seasons, or just do self-contained stories like, you know, the middle of this season was? I don't know. Let me know all your thoughts, theories, and concerns down below. And after that, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and check out more of my videos right over here, because I do recaps, I do interviews, I do random things, and yeah. As always, thanks for hanging out with me and listening to me ramble. It's been fun talking about AHS Stories Season 1 with you. I'll see you next time.